We are ready for a game week. That's right. This is the beginning of game week. NFL football is back tomorrow night, or Thursday night, Bucks and the Cowboys. But more importantly, for the majority of our viewers here on Birds 365, it's Eagle Week. The Eagles return to the field in a game that counts against the Atlanta Falcons, and the guy who's going to give you every piece of information you need for that game is sitting right next to me. That would be my partner, John McMullen. Johnny Mac, how was your holiday weekend?
It was good. How was yours, Jody? I know you were working.
Yeah, I worked. Why do you? I have to ask because I really want to know. You don't have to ask because you know I worked.
But how many shifts? I do want to know.
Just the regular 3. I was on Saturday, I was on Sunday, and I was on last night.
But sometimes it gets amped up because some people take off on the holiday.
True. No double shifts. I did not have to do a double shift at all this weekend. So I guess it was just regular for me, but glad to be back to work. Glad to be back here on Birds 365. The one thing that was good, well, good and bad, I slept in each of the last 3 days. Ooh. I'm used to getting up early enough to do this show. Since we had Labor Day off, I slept in yesterday. So when the alarm went off this morning at 6:15, I was like, uh-oh, football. That's good. Back to work. That's bad. I got to drink.
Yeah, I don't know what it's like to sleep in. I haven't slept past, I would say, 7:30 in 4 or 5 years.
No, you get up every day no matter what?
Every day. Body clock thing. Even if I don't have to, I'm up.
I can if I stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning like I did
that's different.
Doing a show, then I can sleep till 9
if you're
or 10.
up till at some point, if you're up till 3. Although, I take that last Jets game, which got pushed back because of the weather, and I didn't get home till by the time I was done working, that was 3 or 4 o'clock. I forget what it was. I was up.
Still at 7:30, 7:45.
Yeah, well,
you're nuts.
We had to do the show the next day, so that was part of it. I was up before then. So you just power through it.
And then you hopefully get a nap. We're not napping on the Eagles this year. We're both on, at least right now, the boat that says they can win almost as many games as they're going to lose. I'm sorry, I can't get the Eagles above 500. I've tried, folks. I've gone through the schedule. I've been optimistic. I can't get the Eagles to 9 wins, but or at least between now and Friday, we'll find out. I'm doubting it highly. But we are getting ready for a game on Sunday, and it is the Atlanta Falcons. And, John, I will say this. I think this is a winnable game, more so because I don't think the Falcons are going to be very good this year.
No, I agree with you. Now, here's my concern, and I come up this every year. When you're facing a bad football team, you never want to be on the road for the opener of another team because everybody's jacked up. Everybody's so excited. The environment tends to be really difficult to deal with. So that's number one I don't like about it. Number two, you never want to play a bad team early because they don't know how bad they are yet. And they're still fighting and kicking and clawing. Now, you go to week 14 and the Atlanta Falcons are 3-11. That's when you want the Atlanta Falcons, when they've said, oh, we stink. And not that they're not trying, but it's human nature. You're saying to yourself, this is difficult, this is a slog. That first week, all those bad teams, they don't know how bad they are yet. Now, you could make that argument for the Eagles from the Falcons'
That's exactly where I was going. Let's take a quick peek back at last year's standings. Oh, that's right. The Eagles were 4-11. So that kind of balances it for me. If Atlanta doesn't remember how bad they were last year or how bad they're going to be this year, you can very easily say the same thing about the Eagles.
Yeah, definitely. And that's part of it. So that's where I kind of lean in. If this game were in Philadelphia, I'd be really confident about the Eagles, to be honest. The fact that it's down there is a little bit more difficult. I did ask Nick Sirianni yesterday. The Eagles didn't practice, but we had some Zoom stuff. He's been talking all summer about how it's a big advantage that he's a rookie head coach and he doesn't want to show anything in the preseason. And all of a sudden, week 1 is here. And, oh, by the way, you're against a rookie head coach who doesn't want to show anything. So it's kind of comical in the fact that there's so many mirrored aspects of this game to both teams trying to be a little bit better than people expect them to be. I do think, I will say this, if one of these two teams is going to be a little bit better than people think, it's probably going to be the Eagles. So that part of it is a positive to me.
That I do agree. I want to ask you about a couple of guys that the Eagles made available to you via Zoom yesterday, Nick Sirianni being one of them. Another one was a guy who was, for me, I guess I shouldn't be, but I was a little surprised of his choice as a captain. The Eagles named their 6 captains yesterday, as Sirianni explained to you guys and everybody else, by player vote. That's the way he's always done it. Any team he's ever been on, the players vote for it. They came up with 6 guys, 4 on the defensive side, 2 on the offensive side. Read into that what you think you must. The 2 offensive guys were Jalen Hurts, who is, yes, very young in his NFL career to be a captain, but if a quarterback is a leader, he basically has to be one of your captains. That's a foregone conclusion.
And he is a leader, by the way. I think, he would have got voted anyway, because we talk about Jalen Hurts. He's a natural leader, but people gravitate towards him. So that wouldn't even surprise me regardless of position. But sorry to interrupt.
No, I didn't. You're right. He's a leader and he's the quarterback, so it was a no-brainer. Kelsey has been one of the leaders on this team for seems like sneaking up on a decade now, so nobody's surprised by that. Certainly Fletcher Cox, highest paid, been around a long time. He gets a nod, as does Brandon Graham, who is absolutely one of the leaders on the defensive side of the ball. Rodney McLeod, if you've got a safety who's a leader and a guy who's going to call signals, and we assume Rodney's going to call them, if he's going to be out there, we still don't know if he's going to play week 1, but it seems like the Eagles are targeting that and hoping that's the case. Otherwise, they probably would have put him on the IR to start the season. And Alex Singleton, which I guess part of that is special teams. He was a big part of their special teams last year, and even though he's targeted to be on the field as a linebacker for a lot of snaps this year, he'll still be part of the special teams. There's usually a special teams guy in there, but he is also one of the defensive players. So it breaks out 4-2, defense over offense. You read anything into that, Johnny Mac?
No, in fact, I think Alex is more of the special teams. Not that he's not going to play defense, but I think he's the special teams captain, essentially, from that. It's interesting you bring that up, and the Eagles apologize for this. They gave us Singleton on Zoom, as you mentioned, and then they released the captains as soon as he left. And they said they did apologize behind the scenes.
I was waiting for the question about, hey, Alex, how about making captaincy? Because I didn't watch it till after the fact.
Yeah.
So I already knew who the captains were, and then I watched the interviews on the website, and I said, how did they not ask him about the captaincy?
Yeah, because we didn't know, or we would have, and it would have been nice. Right in between Alex, I think he was the last player to speak, and Nick Sirianni, they announced the captains, and they said, sorry, the social media blunder. They sent, these days, the Eagles release everything on social media first.
Right.
And they did apologize for it, but that's why he wasn't asked the question. So it would have been nice to ask the question. We will eventually, obviously, but yeah, I mean, to me, it brings up, okay, this is the special teams captain. Not that Alex, might play more than anybody else, because he's going to be out there all the time on defense, and he's going to be out there all the time on special teams. Really, really a great story in the fact that, this is an example for other players who, and really it starts with Jalen Hurts, to be honest, because I say it all the time, no matter what the Eagles say, they didn't want him on the field. They didn't want him. They're trying Nate Garys of the world who can't play a lick, and they finally put him on the field, and he plays so well they can't get him off. And yeah, but new coaching staff, he finally proved himself to the old coaching staff. He's got to do it again to the new coaching staff. He comes in. Remember, he tested positive at the beginning of training camp for COVID. He got killed for that. He got shamed for that because people didn't wait. And sure enough, he was vaccinated. It was a breakthrough case. Comes back, plays lights out, proves himself to the new coaching staff. He's a captain of this team. It really is the path for Jalen Hurts. And Jalen has a much bigger pedigree than Alex Singleton. But from the standpoint of, if you play well and you're on the field, they're not taking you off the field. From that standpoint, he's a perfect example.
I hope it's the same exact with the new coaching staff. I think it's going to be. They will not forget what Singleton did last year, and they'll judge him for what he's done this year, which, oh, by the way, in the preseason games, which the Eagles seem to de-emphasize like no other team in the National Football League, he was their best player during his preseason games. He's all over the field, making tackles, making splash plays. So, yes, I think he's going to be on the field a lot.
I would argue the Rams de-emphasize even more than the Eagles. The Rams don't play anybody.
I stand corrected. Thank you, Johnny Mac. They play nobody. But at least their head coach has actually been in a Super Bowl. So he's got the gravitas to make that kind of decision. Oh, that's right. Nick Sirianni isn't deciding. Howie Roseman is. I digress. I do want to ask about this, though, because when I heard it, I immediately thought of you. And I give you credit for singing the praises of Alex Singleton here because you are just judging the facts. Alex Singleton took a shot at your boy, Schwartz, yesterday.
He did.
He did say that Schwartz's defense has been around since like
he was stumbling when he was doing it.
It's been around since like the Stone Age. And yes, that's what Jim Schwartz runs. And we shall not change it because it is the Jim Schwartz defense. And it's your job to fit into the Jim Schwartz defense. Whereas this year's defense under Jonathan Gannon is going to be pretty damn flexible. And none of you guys really know what we're going to do yet. So look out for the new and improved flexible defense of the Philadelphia Eagles, which I laughed at, but I even thought was a little harsh because it was Jim Schwartz who put him out there to give him a chance to prove he belongs in the NFL. But the inflexible defense that the Eagles used to run.
Yeah, I don't know. I think people, same thing, and we'll probably talk about Dallas Goedert saying the Eagles went a different way. However he phrased that, I'll have to look up the exact quote. I thought people overjumped that. Remember, when you're talking, and you and I do this every day, you're talking extemporaneously. Sometimes you could see Alex going, uh-oh, when he was talking about. I think he was trying to compliment Jonathan Gannon. And then about halfway through, he was like, oh, and he
took a Schwartz shot. Yes, he did.
And he started stumbling around a little bit. Look, I mean, yeah, Jim is honest. Jim definitely has a philosophy, definitely has a system. His goal is to make the players play fast. He tries to simplify it as much as possible. But I do think it's unfair. And I think if Alex is back, he'll admit that. I mean, he used to get killed, for instance, for playing too much zone, and then Slay gets here and he gets killed for playing too much man-to-man, and vice. I mean, it is what it is. But I think Alex Singleton was trying to compliment Jonathan Gannon, and he started stumbling about halfway through, and he probably said, uh-oh, I probably shouldn't have said that. But he can say that. Who cares? Jim's not here anymore.
He entertained me. I can tell you that because you're a bigger Schwartz fan than I was. All right. The other guy, one of the other guys they gave you yesterday was Dallas Goedert. Speaking his mind, was asked about the ongoing contract negotiations with the Eagles, said he and his representation thought they were going to be able to get something done. But the Eagles went another way.
I knew that was going to get played up. And there's another example. Look, again, in these Zoom circumstances, I'm going to try to ask Dallas when we get back down to practice and we're back to not, face to face, but at least person to person interviews where we can get within 6 feet of them and try to get some clarification. The way I took it as he thought he was going to get an extension done. It didn't get done. Look, there's a lot of reasons for that. I think the Eagles' salary cap issues, again, lighten up after the season, not before the season. I think his representation knows, and they were just validated by the Mark Andrews contract in Baltimore, that this guy's going to get paid a lot of money. The Eagles are probably looking for a more cost-effective, cost-friendly deal, and they probably would have signed off on it. So I think that's what he was trying to get at, but the way he phrased it, and again, Dallas is just a player speaking off the top of his head. It comes across like, oh, the Eagles are going in a different direction, like they told him that. I do think the Eagles want Dallas Goedert. The Eagles plan to have Dallas Goedert, and the Eagles plan to sign him to an extension. They just haven't been able to get it done yet. There's a couple curveballs. As we said, when Minnesota lost Irv Smith, they called the Eagles, but they called the Eagles about Dallas Goedert, not Zack Ertz. And evidently Howie Roseman placed the price so high that Minnesota went in a different direction. Then there's also the constant Deshaun Watson rumors. So if Deshaun Watson ever decides, okay, throw Philadelphia in the mix, the assumption around the league is, well, you're going to have to give some players along with draft picks to Houston if you're going to acquire a player like that. And the Eagles don't have a ton of young players that would fit into, the type of talent you're looking for when you're trying to spin off. So the assumption is Goddard would be in that type of trade. Howie Roseman's always open for business. Always. That's why he got in trouble with Zack Ertz. He'll listen. You pick up the phone, you ask about anybody, he'll listen. But I don't think they're actively shopping Dallas Goedert. They're actively trying to get rid of Dallas Goedert. They just haven't gotten to the point where they feel they can get the extension done.
It's fun. I think it's funny that you said Howie throws a one ask number on Goddard and Minnesota decides to go in another way. And you were questioning Dallas Goedert in the way he described the Eagles decided to go in another way. Maybe Dallas and his representation believed the Eagles' offer was so low as compared to other tight ends in the league. You said they would have liked to get a cap-friendly deal for themselves. Maybe that's how they interpret the Eagles have gone another way, because they didn't really bring a fair and true and compromisable deal.
That is probably true. That is probably, they want less than what Mark Andrews got. I can tell you that, because, the bar was Kittle, and they didn't want to go above that bar. I do know that. So generally contracts are about timing and circumstance. We always talk about it. The next guy gets the most money.
Yep.
Dallas Goedert and is trying to get the most money. And he should, because he's well regarded around the league. But the Eagles are probably going to hold off until their salary cap situation is better. And you remember, you and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I said, if I were Dallas Goedert, I would bet on myself, because it isn't going down. And this is what Joe Banner always says, and he's right, by the way. That's why the Eagles sort of set this philosophy in motion. Identify young players you like, you want early, and extend them as early as possible, because it never comes down. Again, unless there's a massive injury or something of that nature, the numbers never coming down. So the Eagles have been smart with that. And on the other side of the fence, you can be smart about it too and realize that number's not coming down. If I just play to my level, it's going up. And I think Dallas Goedert should bet on himself.
Here's the one way that it might not go Dallas Goedert way and go up, as you say, the number has to go up. No, they were banking on him being the tight end one. And right now, if you ask me who's got the chance to go out and make the most catch and get the most yards to the Eagles, it's a toss-up between he and Zack Ertz. So there's a 1 and 1A. And a lot of people believe during this offseason, Zack Ertz was going to be the one, and who knows who's going to be the two, Richard Rodgers or whoever else. He's now sharing that tight end one position, and you keep trying to tell me they're going to try and get into less 12 formation than they did last year. I don't know about that, because their best players are both tight ends when it comes to receivers. So I
agree with that, but I don't think it's up to, if Zack Ertz plays like Zack Ertz previously, 2015 to 2019 version, and Dallas Goedert just plays like Dallas Goedert, it's still going up, because people are still going to value him. In other words, if they both play well, people are not going to say, oh, Dallas Goedert isn't a good player. They already think he is around this league. And I don't think that part of the equation shifts if Zack Ertz plays well. But I agree with you with the Eagles, Nick Sirianni. Boy, I think it's going to happen week one. They might try to throw out Jalen Reagor and Quez Watkins. Let's get speed on the field. And, man, that first press coverage bump, the first drop, and they're going to go, let's get our good players on the field. I agree with you.
Let's get our best lineup out there. All right. He is John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. Coming up next, we got our first guest of the day. We tried to get him up here last week. Miscommunication on my part with the rosters being cut down. Guy who knows what it's like to put together a roster in the National Football League. He did so for the Washington Redskins, their former general manager, now talk show host in Baltimore, Vinny Cerrato. Up next here on Birds 365.
Hey, Eagles fans, if you're a subscriber to the JAKIB Media YouTube channel, you are already registered to win a pair of season tickets for the upcoming season. That's right, you could win a pair of season tickets for the upcoming 2021 season, just for being a subscriber. If you're watching and you're not a subscriber, do it now. Subscribe to the JAKIB Media YouTube channel right now. What do you need to do? Subscribe right now.
As a hardworking American, you've never experienced how tough life can be until now. A catastrophic injury while working on the job. A personal injury from someone else's negligence. Turned away by other law firms in the region who didn't bother to learn your story. It's time to meet the Fritz & Bianculli Law Firm and managing partner Brian Fritz. Badly injured? Call the Fritz & Bianculli Law Firm. Find out why they say, "We got this."
The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local Union 98, is a proud sponsor of The Labor Show with J. Doc and Krause every Saturday night from 6 till 8 p.m. IBEW Local 98's highly trained and superbly skilled electricians are the best in the business, setting the highest safety standards in the electrical industry. So when you're planning your next industrial, commercial, or residential project, choose an IBEW Local 98 union contractor. Learn more at ibew98.org.
The savoring taste of a good bag of beef jerky is so enjoyable at any time of the day, as long as you can find it. Here's what we suggest. Pure Bull Beef Jerky is our answer, and soon it will be yours. Locally produced in the Philadelphia region, this high-quality, healthy protein snack is easy to secure. Go to steersnacks.com, and you'll see hot garlic, tropical heat, Pure Bull dry rub, and our favorite, Huck and Fod. What's that? Huck and Fod. Go now to steersnacks.com.
I get scared sometimes.
Of a lot of things.
Joining in.
Decisions.
The dark.
The dark.
But I once heard someone say,
But as I always say,
it's okay to be afraid.
as long as you face the fear.
And keep moving forward.
Wherever you are in life, count on the name trusted in insurance for over 80 years. Independence Blue Cross.
On the field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on three. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Game week has arrived. The National Football League gets their regular season underway Thursday night and then big time on Sunday. Here to lend us some insight to the entire National Football League, guy who knows it quite well, was in it for years, doing sports talk in Baltimore these days, and a proud papa. Before we get into football, Cerrato, Vinny Cerrato joins us here on Birds 365. Who am I going to have to start paying attention to? Charlie signed his letter of intent to play college hockey for who?
Michigan.
Wow. Michigan.
Yeah.
Is it still?
Well, he only committed. He committed to Michigan. He's just going to be a junior in high school right now. He's playing for the development team out of Plymouth, Michigan. So it's a 2-year commitment there. And how about Jody? They're going to, in November, they're going to Finland. December, they're going to Slovakia.
Oh,
wow. Now, Vinny, I thought you would steer him back to Minnesota. Minnesota Duluth. Get him up to Minnesota Duluth.
No, we visited. It was his choice. He visited Minnesota, Michigan, Notre Dame, Penn State, Boston University. So he had some some opportunities, and Wisconsin. He liked Michigan. Came down to Michigan and Wisconsin.
Okay, yeah, kind of told you, yeah, Dad, Notre Dame's not happening, huh? The Irish are known for hockey. They're more known for the gridiron than they are for their hockey team.
Well, we went and visited Jody last week because we watched football practice, before they were getting ready for the Florida State game. So that was kind of fun. They're
pretty good at hockey, though, aren't they, Vinny? Notre Dame's pretty good at hockey.
Yeah, Notre Dame's good in hockey. They've had some pros and stuff, but University of Michigan had 4 of the top 5 picks in the NHL draft last year.
Oh, well. All right. There we go.
That was a pretty good lore for him to show up there. Well, please tell Charlie we said congratulations. But we do want to get you on to talk some football here. Kind of another make it up as you go along type season here in the NFL, coming out of a major COVID season now with new COVID rules and hopefully less issues than we had last year, but they're still very present. Is this season going to get off without a hitch, Vinny? Are we going to get all the games in? Last year, rescheduling, playing games on Thursday afternoon had never been done before in the National Football League. Is the NFL well situated to get their whole year in?
Oh, I think if they made it through last year with no vaccinations, then I think they'll make it through this year. And I liked the games on Tuesday and Wednesday. It was kind of fun to have football all week long.
Now, Vinny, if you could go back to your days as a GM, though, you have sort of this baked-in bye week now with only 3 preseason games. Yeah. So you saw all weekend kids going back to their colleges, and you see some of those crowds. You mentioned Notre Dame, Florida State, Wisconsin. Anybody who saw Gus Johnson call that? Fans were going crazy. They're packed on top of each other. How would there be any hand-wringing for you as a GM saying, okay, guys, look, you're going to be around young people. Maybe the protocols aren't the best. And all of a sudden you come back, you test positive. Zach Martin, Dallas Cowboys, Thursday night. Now, he wasn't back. That happened earlier. He's not going to be out there. It's just in a lot of ways going to be more difficult for the teams.
Well, I saw an interview yesterday, Jerry Jones, and he said that Zach Martin has a chance to be back because he was vaccinated, and he has to have, 2 negative tests over a 24-hour period. So he's got a shot to be back. I would be, if any of my players were Lamar Jackson not vaccinated, I wouldn't want them, leaving, because the Ravens were off Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And vaccinated players, go ahead. Unvaccinated players, I would be really nervous about them going and being in that type of environment.
Vinny, you mentioned the Ravens. No, you cover them down there in Baltimore. I was contemplating picking them to win the division, but man, did they get hit by the injury bug, not the COVID bug, the injury bug here right before the season started. Lost 2 of their key wide receivers. J.K. Dobbins done for the entire year. They're bringing in Le'Veon Bell to get a look at him. Man, did Lamar Jackson's weapons take a hit this last week before the season got underway.
Yeah, no question about it, Jody. Rashad Bateman was the big one because he was their best receiver by far, and he looked really good, and he went up and had surgery up in Philly from Dr. Myers, and I had Sean Springs on, last week because Sean had that surgery, and he's going to be out till at least probably second week in October, I would think. Bateman will be, and then you talk about the running back Dobbins. I predicted Dobbins would rush for over 1,200 yards this year and probably a 300 yards rush receiving. And Justice Hill is a good back who they trust, who played well for them down the stretch last year. Now they got Ty Williams and they got Gus Edwards. They have 2 guys that are playing that weren't in their roles last year. So it's going to be interesting. I mean, Gus Edwards is a good player. Can he carry the load? And Ty Williams, who's on the practice squad last year, what's he going to be? My biggest concern about the Ravens, though, Jody, is the O-line. The O-line, their first group played against Washington last week against Washington's 2s, and they give up 2 sacks in that drive. I'm just nervous because Lamar will have a good year if the O-line can pass protect, but he doesn't ever get time to throw. They're decent run blockers, but right now they're not good pass protectors.
You know, that's interesting, Benny, because Ronnie Stanley, I think he was on his way to being, if not the top left tackle in football, one of the top left tackles until he got injured. So how is he looking coming back off that injury? Has it been a struggle for him?
He's been coming back slowly. He played in his first game in a long, long time, against Washington. He gave up one pressure in that game. So I'm not nervous about Ronnie Stanley. I think he'll be all right. But Villanueva has been struggling the whole camp, and Zeitler does a nice job in the run game, but he struggles a little bit in the pass. Their left guard, Ben Powers, it's a revolving door at the left guard, and he just doesn't sustain very well. So they've got some issues in the pass game.
Vinny, let me ask you about your former squad before we get your take on the Eagles. Got to know about the Washington football team. They're the defending champions. They've got a defense that says they should be favored to win it again. Cowboy fans aren't going to be happy with that, but I think they are the favorite to win it again. Antonio Gibson came in from Memphis last year and grabbed the job by the throat, and I give him credit for it. But this year, everyone's going to have a little bit more of a book on Antonio Gibson, and it may be a little bit more difficult. Do you think the Redskins' backfield is good enough that they can win games? I know Fitzmagic will be Fitzmagic and Fitztragic and what he's been his entire career, the best of the best and the worst of the worst. Are they going to be able to ground out wins in the NFC East this year?
Yeah, they're going to have to ground them out. They're going to have to play great on defense, great on special teams, and not turn the ball over. I went over and I saw Dan Snyder for the first time in like 11 years, like a month ago, and I said, Dan, what about your quarterback? Because he's all over the place. He said, all he's got to do is not turn it over. We're good on defense. So, I mean, that's kind of what they're thinking is play good defense and just don't turn it over. But as we all know, Fitzmagic, he can be great for 4 games, bad for 2, good for 1, bad for 2, so you just don't ever know what you're going to get with him. That's the problem with Washington, I think, is just consistency with their offense, and can they stay healthy on defense?
Now, Benny, you said you saw Daniel Snyder for the first time in 11 years. Did he contact you at 3 a.m. to make it feel like old times?
No, he didn't. He didn't. It was Shiva for his mother passed away. So I went down, he called me and invited me down, for the Shiva. So I took the 2 boys with me, and Dan's son actually is like H-back at Appy State. He was a freshman going in there. So it was kind of, and how about this? How about Jerry, his son? He still has his picture up on his wall of Vincent and Charlie and him together, and in pictures and stuff. So that was kind of fun. And I'll tell you what, when I talked to him, it was like I saw him yesterday. It wasn't different at all. It was kind of surreal how it was.
Now, you mentioned Washington football team against the Ravens, and you mentioned the Ravens struggling against that front, but it was the second teamers. How good is that Washington front overall? Is that the best front in this league?
It might be. I mean, they got all first rounders, and Sweat and Chase are good pass rushers. Allen's a good, so they can get after the quarterback. So that front, they're good on defense. Can they stay healthy? And that second group wasn't bad. I mean, against Baltimore's first, they had 2 sacks, and they weren't playing any of their guys. So they're going to have a good rotation. Can they score enough? Like when they play Dallas, can they score enough points to beat the Cowboys? That's going to be the key there. With Philly, I think Philly's in a rebuild, and who knows Daniel Jones, with the Giants. I'm not crazy about the Giants. I think it'll be Dallas or probably Washington, in that division.
All right, and we do want to get your take on the Eagles, but let me ask you this last thing first. You lived it. I sort of lived it. I lived it from just outside the loop, with my father being a general manager in professional baseball. The relationship between the GM and the coach, many people say it's the most important relationship in an entire sporting organization, and I tend to agree. Here in Philadelphia, Howie Roseman is a very hands-on general manager. How important is that relationship between GM and coach?
It's extremely important. I had Joe Gibbs in Washington. I had some with Norv Turner. It was great too, because Norv and I saw things eye to eye. When we had Spurrier, that was a little bit different. He saw only blue and orange. It's all he wanted. He said, I gotta have Danny Warfel, at cut down time. We can't cut Warfel. It took me like an hour. Dan says, you go down and talk to him. So I said, Steve, we got to cut Warfel. He says, no, he fought it. Then he slept on it. And then he came back in the next day. He says, my wife said he's magical. We got to keep him. But with Joe Gibbs, Joe was awesome, because you got to be joined at the hip. And Joe was so respectful to everything, that he included you in everything. I mean, Joe made all the decisions. He had final say so on everything. I'll give you one. Chris Samuels. We were gonna sign him. It was like it was Senior Bowl time, and his agent kind of had us because we were in cap trouble and we needed Chris to restructure. So I mean, he really pinched us, and so Joe and I walk in, and Dan's in there with Louis Riddick, Scott, all the other personnel people, and all the other, and Eric Schaefer, who was our contract guy. And Dan, Joe and I walk into the room, and Dan says, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to sign him." And he said to Joe, "What do you want to do?" And we were the only two that wanted to sign him. Everybody else said, "Let him go." So Dan says, "Okay, all right, I'll sign him. You two want him, I'll sign him." So me and Joe walk out. We walk down the hall, and he grabs my arm. He says, "If Chris gets hurt, we're both jumping off the ledge together." And he went on to be like 4 more Pro Bowls after that, so it was good.
Now, going back to Danny Werfel, what you should have done, Vinny, is sent Spurrier to the golf course and release Werfel when he was on the legs, and that way you could have avoided all the trouble there. But I do want to talk to you about
when he left, yeah. John, how about when he decided to quit? Me and Dan, because he was at the golf course. Me and Dan were at the movie theaters watching him. We're at the movie theaters watching a movie, and then like Dan goes outside to take a phone call, and then he calls me. I'm sitting in the movie theater watching it by myself now, and he calls me. He says, "Get out here, get out here." I said, "What?" I said, "The movie's good." And he said, "Spurrier's calling from the golf course and wants to quit."
The tremendous stories from Vinny Cerrato. I do want to talk to you about that coach-GM relationship. And how much is it overblown, Vinny? We always talk about 52nd, 53rd. How much disagreement is there between it might be a personnel guy, it might not be the coach GM, but when you're that deep in the roster, the people kind of overblow that kind of stuff.
My thinking was, even in San Fran, that's the coach's decision, not my decision. The coach's decision, because they know what they need, they know what they want. Like when we were in San Fran, but the reason why we were really good in San Francisco was everybody knew their role, and we had personnel meetings during those times. During training camp, every night we would meet and we would talk over personnel. So everybody was always on the same page. That was the thing, because it was all inclusive and everybody understood where we were at. I'll tell you a good story. George Seifert about T.O. T.O., he was dropping everything in training camp, dropping all kinds of balls. So we're going to play our first preseason game. And George comes up to me and says, "I think your boy needs to be on a practice squad. He's not ready yet." So we go to the game, and he catches like 5 balls and a touchdown in the first preseason game. And George goes, "I guess your boy's a gamer."
That's the early stages of TO with our buddy Vinny Cerrato here with us on Birds 365. All right, Vinny, need your take on the Birds. You're down in Baltimore, so you've seen what Lamar Jackson has done. I won't say to revolutionize the position, but take it to another level with his ability to pull it down and take off and make plays with his legs. That's going to be a key element, I believe, for the Eagles this year with Jalen Hurts. He was very effective turning it upfield and making first downs with his legs. The question with Lamar has always been he's good throwing the football, but he's not great. He's not Mahomes-like. He's not going to have those type of numbers. He's not Aaron Rodgers. Is he going to be able to throw it effectively enough? We look at the same thing with Jalen Hurts coming into this year. If Lamar is a couple steps ahead of Jalen because he's a couple more steps in the league, do you like the progression that Lamar has made? Can Hurts duplicate that here in Philadelphia over the next year or two?
I don't think he can duplicate what Lamar can do running. I mean, Lamar's the fastest, one of the fastest people in the league. Jalen Hurts is not the type of runner that Lamar Jackson is. So that's not even – Lamar could be a big-time running back. I mean, Lamar's going to rush for 1,000 yards every year. Jalen Hurts is not going to do that. He doesn't have those kind of skills. You know, I think the key with both guys is I think, you know, both can throw the football if they have time to throw the ball. That's the thing. Because, you know, it's about fundamentals of throwing the football and stuff. And, like, what happened with Lamar last year, he couldn't step and throw. And, like, the Eagles' offensive line sucked last year too, you know, and so did the Ravens. And if you don't have time to throw, you can't step. You know, it's just like throwing a baseball. If you're not stepping at your target, it's hard to be accurate. And that's what happened to Lamar, why Lamar went down with his accuracy. So if the Eagles, if they can get pass protection, he'll complete balls. But if he has to scramble all over the place and can't step when he throws and, you know, the rush is forced into his face because he can't see, you know, then he's going to struggle.
Vinny, more sort of existential question from me, and this will be my last for you. And thanks for joining the program. Great stories. I love Vinny Cerrato stories, just phenomenal. But you know, when you're at this position and you're on the cusp of week one, so I want to take you back to your GM executive days. Did you always know what you had? Was there any surprises? In other words, did you think, okay, we got a potential 10-win team. We're not very good. We're rebuilding. Did you always have a good feel for what you had? I ask that because the Eagles have a rookie head coach, really a first-time starting quarterback with 4. Can they possibly know what they have, or do you guys get a good feel for that?
In San Francisco, we had a good feel all the time, you know, because we always won. I mean, we won. The least we ever won was 10, you know, so we always won at least 10 games. So we always, you know, we were always Super Bowl or bust, you know, like where the Eagles are, where I was at times in Washington. A lot of times you don't know, you know, I mean, it was like in 99 in Washington, we ended up winning the division. Did we expect that? No, we had Brad Johnson, who was new quarterback. We had Steven Davis, you know, and our receivers. All of a sudden with Westbrook and Albert Cannell, we were 1-2 in the league, you know, and our defense kind of stepped up and we could run the football and throw the football. So that was a surprise for us winning the division. So I think a lot of times you're learning a lot about your football team. And you've got to learn, you know, and you're rookies. You got to learn about them. You know, the one year when Sean Taylor passed, we were 5-6 at the time. Then we won the rest of our games and, you know, and you don't know those kind of things, what's going to happen, and you don't know about the injuries, and you don't know how the team's going to come together. That's the biggest, because, you know, you kind of grow as a group, especially when you're in a situation like the Eagles. I mean, Kansas City, Tampa, those teams know who they are and what they are and what to expect. You know, the Eagles, they don't know. The biggest thing is what you got to do is you got to stay healthy. You know, if the Eagles can stay healthy, they'll have a chance to win games. I mean, because they don't have the depth that other teams have.
I'm jumping back into the general manager and coach relationship again for my final question. I don't know if the Eagles are going to be ready to play week one against Atlanta. They derivated from what has been common usage of players in preseason to get ready. There's one less preseason game, so that cuts into it to begin with. And with this team, Nick Sirianni chose to give most of his star players basically the preseason off, handful of snaps. We'll see. Maybe they come out. We know they're pretty damn healthy, so it's worked in that regard. But we'll see if they're up to speed for playing full 60 games. Again, how much did you dictate? How much did the coach dictate? Did you just go hands off and say, Coach, it's your team now. You play who you need. I provided you the roster. It's going to be up to you to decide who's going to play X amount of snaps. How did you and your coaches get along in deciding how to handle preseason to get ready for game one?
It was all about the coaches. The coaches did it all, and I stepped away. I mean, we drafted, but the coaches were involved in everything we did. It was everybody was included in all that. I sat in on the meetings of, who was going to play when and all that. I didn't have a problem with it, because I'm just sitting there evaluating, the situation at that time. But it was the coach's decision. Once we got to a certain point, you got to training camp. The coaches know best, not me. I'm not telling them, hey, you got to keep this guy, you got to keep that guy. No, they have a feel for it. They're sitting in their meetings with them and everything, and if they don't want to keep a draft pick, they don't want to keep a draft pick, and the players know. You go ask a player in May, is this guy going to help us? No. Or is this guy going to help us? Absolutely. Like the year we drafted Chris Samuels, who was working with him every day? Bruce Smith, because he knew he could help him in the fall. So the players know, who should be on a team and who shouldn't be on a team, and they know who can and can't help them. But back to the question, no. At cut down time, the coaches, I would sit in the meetings and we would do cuts and stuff, and sometimes I kind of but I let them decide.
That is pretty telling. I think the game has changed. I know you're out a couple of years, Vin, but seems like much more hands-on from general managers, and we believe that.
A lot of analytics. A lot of analytics getting involved.
A lot of analytics. Very true. Vinny, great stuff. Again, tell Charlie we said congrats. Thanks for coming on. We'll tap into you during the season. We appreciate it.
No problem. Anytime.
Thanks,
that is Vinny Cerrato, former general manager of the Washington Redskins, a.k.a. the Washington football team, who now does sports talk down in Baltimore. Can come on and talk both Washington, Baltimore, and some Eagles with us here on Birds 365. All right, coming back, Johnny Mac, Jody Mac, the Mac and Mac guys. I got a couple of Eagle things I need to run by my partner next here on Birds 365.
Hey, Eagles fans, if you're a subscriber to the JAKIB Media YouTube channel, you are already registered to win a pair of season tickets for the upcoming season. That's right, you could win a pair of season tickets for the upcoming 2021 season, just for being a subscriber. If you're watching and you're not a subscriber, do it now. Subscribe to the JAKIB Media YouTube channel right now. What do you need to do? Subscribe right now.
As a hardworking American, you've never experienced how tough life can be until now. A catastrophic injury while working on the job. A personal injury from someone else's negligence. Turned away by other law firms in the region who didn't bother to learn your story. It's time to meet the Fritz & Bianculli Law Firm and managing partner Brian Fritz. Badly injured? Call the Fritz & Bianculli Law Firm. Find out why they say, "We got this."
The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local Union 98, is a proud sponsor of The Labor Show with J. and Krause every Saturday night from 6 till 8 p.m. IBEW Local 98's highly trained and superbly skilled electricians are the best in the business, setting the highest safety standards in the electrical industry. So when you're planning your next industrial, commercial, or residential project, choose an IBEW Local 98 union contractor. Learn more at IBEW98.org.
The savoring taste of a good bag of beef jerky is so enjoyable at any time of the day, as long as you can find it. Here's what we suggest. Pure Bull Beef Jerky is our answer, and soon it will be yours. Locally produced in the Philadelphia region, this high-quality, healthy protein snack is easy to secure. Go to steersnacks.com, and you'll see hot garlic, tropical heat, Pure Bull dry rub, and our favorite, Huck and Fod. What's that? Huck and Fod. Go now to steersnacks.com.
I get scared sometimes.
Of a lot of things.
Joining in.
Decisions.
The dark.
The dark.
But I once heard someone say,
But as I always say,
it's okay to be afraid.
as long as you face the fear.
And keep moving forward.
Wherever you are in life, count on the name trusted in insurance for over 80 years. Independence Blue Cross.
field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on three. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Mac and Mac guys here on Birds 365. We certainly thank Vinny Cerrato for hopping aboard. As John said right before we went to break, he's like a library, just got great stories. And when you get Vinny going, wind him up, he starts telling stories. He can put a smile on your face.
Yeah.
If you're a
By the
footballer.
way, would T.O. show up and practice and join practices? He's got a point there. There are gamers, as they say.
That's very true. But somehow we're supposed to know the Eagles are good because they were really good in joint practices.
Yes, undefeated in joint practices.
4-0, huge. That's why I have some reservations about the early part of the schedule this year with the Birds. But there is one thing that, and this is, Vinny's not alone in this, and maybe I'm just a bigger fan and have more confidence. I think people are underestimating Jalen Hurts' ability to run the football with the start of this season. No, we didn't get in until 3/4 of the way through the year and ended up starting 4 games. His final game, he only rushed for 30-some-odd yards because they had to get the unstoppable Nate Sudfeld into the game in the second half. But the 3 weeks previous to that, he had rushed for 106, 63, and 69 yards. Johnny Mac, I did the math. That's 79 yards a game over a 3-game period. Now, I know you got to average it out. That was 3 games. I guess it's like Travis Fulgham had that 4-game run, and what happened before and what happened after. Well, not enough to give him a chance to make the football team this year. I think Jalen Hurts running the football is going to be a major weapon for the Philadelphia Eagles. All right, he's not as fast as Lamar Jackson. I don't need him to be as fast. He might not be as dynamic as Murray of Arizona. But I think he's the 3rd best running quarterback in the National Football League. I think it's a legitimate weapon. I think this team is going to run a ton of RPOs, and he's going to keep the football and turn it upfield and move the chains. I think it's going to be a big part of the Eagles' offense this year. Jalen Hurts keeping the football and running with it. Do you think it is or is?
I agree with you. I think you're going to show up week 1. You're going to see a ton of RPOs. I think he's going to be a huge impact from a rushing standpoint. That's going to be a big part of this offense. I've said the same thing. What I think Vinny was saying is what I said. We've talked about it on this show. I don't like the Lamar Jackson comparison because they're different types of runners. Lamar Jackson's this freakish, athletic, the best correlation previously would be Michael Vick, even more athletic than that, if that's possible. But Jalen Hurts is a power lifter. I've always made the comparison that he's like Cam Newton, not as big. He's that type of runner. Still very effective, still very important to the offense and capable of helping the offense. I think what Vinny was trying to say, they're not similar type players. And I agree with that. I think the better comparison from a running standpoint is a Cam Newton type, not because of the size. It's not a perfect comparison because Cam is just this monstrous, but from a power standpoint, and again, Jalen Hurts dating back to his high school days was a power lifter. I've heard one personnel executive say he's like a fullback playing quarterback. He's just powerful. I don't think people realize how powerful he is because he's not Cam Newton stature, but he's incredibly, incredibly strong. I don't think the comparison is there stylistically with Lamar Jackson.
Understood. I do think you can compare them, and you just need to compare production instead of style. I don't care how Jalen Hurts rushes for 1,000 yards this year. I don't. Whether it's with speed and or moves and juking a defender rather than dropping his shoulder and moving a defender and extending the football and getting 3 or 4 extra yards. There's more than one way to skin a cat. And if he and Lamar Jackson do it differently, that's perfectly fine to me. I just want to compare what they're producing. How many yards are they getting? How many first downs are they getting when they pull the football down and take off with it? I think you can compare those two things between those two quarterbacks. Just because one does it with more dexterity and one does it with more power, you can still compare the two of them. And I really do believe there's 3 running quarterbacks in this league, guys who absolutely are going to make big plays with their legs, and the Eagles have one of them.
Yeah, I agree
Lamar
with
Jackson,
that.
Murray, and Jalen Hurts, and everyone. And Josh Allen has got the capabilities of doing it, but I just don't think he's going to do it that much, and I think he'll do it less this year than he's ever done it before. I still think it's going to be a huge part of the Eagles' offense this year. Jalen Hurts taking off.
Oh, it was a huge part when he was in for the short period he was. I mean, you have to take advantage of his running ability. You have to. I mean, that's one of the strengths in theory of Jalen Hurts' game. The Eagles know that. That part I agree with. I think what Vinny was trying to say is they're not stylistically comparable. But yeah, if you're just talking about impact and piling up yards and how you do it, you're not looking at how you do it. Yeah, he's going to be very effective. That's a big part of his game. No question about it.
You mentioned that Lamar Jackson rushed for 1,000 yards. I think there's a chance that Jalen Hurts rushes for 1,000 yards.
Well, I here's where I'll deter. I don't want him to rush for 1,000 yards.
Do you want to win football games this year?
Well, yes and no. Do you want to get him hurt? I think if he's rushing for 1,000 yards, if you hit that number, you probably played a significant level of footballs. But I do ultimately think you're playing with fire. I do ultimately think he's going to get hurt. There's the difference. There's the big difference between Lamar Jackson to this point. And by the way, I think if Lamar Jackson plays long enough, he's going to get hurt as well. But there's the difference. Lamar Jackson, nobody can hit the guy because he's such a freak athletically to this point. Jalen Hurts, people are going to hit him. And if you play like a fullback playing quarterback, that's my concern.
I think that the Eagles are not as concerned as John McMullen is because they haven't committed to Jalen Hurts going forward for years to come. If he carries them for 14 weeks, he gets hurt in week 15. Here comes off the bench Gardner Minshew to try and save the day.
That is if that's their plan. If their plan is essentially, Ezekiel Elliott early in his career, but only a quarterback. We only got this guy for a short period. Let's run him into the ground. Yeah, maybe. It depends. But I think, you mentioned Josh Allen, and I think that's a nice comparison of where I want to go. Josh Allen could do all that. The Bills don't want him to do all that because the Bills want him to be their quarterback for a really long time. And I think the Bills are right. The question is, do the Eagles want Jalen Hurts to be their quarterback for a really long time? I don't know.
Nor do they, and that's why you talk about not being able to make a comparison. As soon as Allen signed that contract, the amount of running he was going to do in this upcoming season was probably cut in half. They said, Josh, throw the ball away. Josh, throw the ball away. Josh, get rid of the football. Don't turn it upfield, Josh. Throw the ball out of bounds. Because they are committed to him financially now, not just in their belief, but also in their salary cap, which is huge. The Eagles aren't committed to Jalen Hurts for more than...
I agree with that. I've said that forever. I get killed on the stream and everywhere else for saying the Eagles don't necessarily believe in Jalen Hurts, but I'm also not going to go down the route of they don't care about Jalen Hurts. They're not going to use him as this disposable service and just take advantage. Okay, he could run the football now and just use him up and then go to the next page. I'm not that cynical, which is surprising because I'm pretty cynical. I haven't gotten to that point yet. I don't think they want that for him. But at the end of the day, look, his running ability is going to be a huge, huge part of this offense, a huge part.
On that, it seems we can both agree. Vinny gave us a good take on the Eagles. I was a little surprised. I got to be honest and admit this. Tony Romo, who took a lot of grief in this town because he was the Cowboy quarterback. And if you're an Eagles fan, you hate every single Cowboy, so you hated Tony Romo too. But the guy's proven to be a really good in-game analyst on CBS, their lead dog. I guess he was doing some media responsibilities this week to get people to watch the games and sponsors and everything else for CBS. He took two pretty hard stances, which both surprised me a little bit. The first was he compared Zach Wilson of the Jets to Patrick Mahomes.
You like that, don't you? Yeah, the all-platform throw. By the way, I love Zach Wilson. I think I told you. That kid can sling the football, man. I'm not going to say he's Patrick Mahomes, but he's got these weird and funky arm angles. I can see the comparison. He does this all-platform stuff that you probably don't want to teach as if you were being, fundamentally sound. But he's got a natural ability to do it. I would be excited if I were a Jets fan about Zach Wilson.
He's got some swagger to his game. I will agree with you there. But do you have to compare him to the best quarterback?
Yeah, well,
nothing like setting the bar high, Tony Romo. Thanks for that, big guy.
That's never fair. And that's the reason. See, I didn't hear Tony's comments. I'm assuming he's talking about his playing style and what I was saying, those all-platform throws, the arm angles, the arm slots. He's got a lot of those capabilities. I'm guessing that's what Tony meant, but people just...
No. He was talking about production.
Well,
he can do what Patrick Mahomes does. That's not just slinging it sidearm. That's throwing for 375 yards.
If he's talking about production, let me know when Zach Wilson gets around Andy Reid, Travis Kelce, and Tyreek Hill, and then maybe. Probably not, though.
Ridiculous. The other thing that Romo said was the Eagles are being well underrated, that people are sleeping a little bit on the Philadelphia Eagles, and they're a team that if they get the right breaks, and Sirianni is the guy, double-digit wins this year.
Yeah.
That he thinks the Eagles can win 10 games. I didn't see that one coming from Tony Romo. Again, it all comes down to where you're setting your bars. And a guy like him, whose opinion is as well respected as it is, he's a high-profile NFL guy. When you're the lead analyst on one of the major networks, you just inherit that type of gravitas. He's got the Eagles winning double-digit games, Johnny Mac. Are we putting a little too much pressure on the Eagles?
Is that pressure? I will say this. If you believe in the quarterback, you should think this team is going to win 10 games because they have the offensive and defensive lines, and that's where everything is kind of morphs from and sort of grows out of. So if you believe in the quarterback, you should be at 10 wins. Does Tony believe in the quarterback? I don't know how you can. Only from this step, we saw 10 live reps. And we saw what we saw last year. So I use the term uncertainty. People assume that's negative. Not necessarily. It could be positive. But I think we all have to agree it's uncertain. I don't know what to expect because I haven't seen it. There's no demonstrated performance. But if you believe in the kid, you should be at 10 wins.
I think Jalen Hurts has got a chance to have a real nice year. I'm a little more confident in his rushing ability than his throwing ability, and putting throwing ability second isn't all about him. John, my biggest concern about this offense is unquestionably at the wide receiver position.
Oh, yeah.
You know how big a fan of DeVonta Smith I am. Quez Watkins had a great first preseason game. You can talk to all the joint practice plays that he did or didn't make. I can't because I wasn't there. But he had, even in that one game, he had two plays, one of which was an incomplete pass, one of which was a wide receiver screen, well blocked, well run by him.
Wow.
He just sprinted by everybody, and give him credit for that. And one play where he got behind the defense and Jalen overthrew him by about 3 yards. That's it. And he is now at least wide receiver 3, if not wide receiver 2 on this team, Because what did Jalen Reagor do other than make a couple of highlight practice catches?
Yeah.
They have so little already proven experience at the wide receiver position. It scares the snot out of me.
Oh, I'm in the same boat. And I just talked about uncertainty. So, Jody, you've been covering this league for a long time. Anytime you have questions, they're not all answered in a positive fashion. So if you say, if Jalen Reagor does this, I say this all the time, if Quez Watkins does this, if Jalen Hurts does it, all of those are not going to be positive. Right. I got news for you. And you talk about Quez Watkins, who, had a great summer, deserves this opportunity because he's better than everybody else the Eagles trotted out there against him. At the same time, you say great preseason game, really great preseason play. And by the way, if Brett Toth doesn't make that block, it's going nowhere. If Richard Rodgers is not even here, doesn't make that block, it's going nowhere. So, I mean, there were other parts to that play as well. And then you bring up the Jalen Hurts overthrow. Well, wasn't an overthrow. Jalen protected him. It might have been, but he also got bumped off his route early. He's not the most physical kid in the world. So, all of a sudden, a big play turns into an overthrow by the quarterback, perhaps because the wide receiver got bumped off his route because he's not physical enough. There's a lot of issues there. I wouldn't expect a superstar receiver out of Quez Watkins. I'll just say that. And Jalen Reagor, yeah, I mean, the inconsistency and the route running, it's just not good. I don't even talk about DeVonta Smith because I think that kid's going to be good. I do have concern, 166 pounds, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. We all know that. If he's out there, I think he's going to be fine. There's going to be hiccups. You already saw hiccups. You saw a couple drops in the preseason. It's not going to be all peaches and cream, but he's going to be a good player. The other two, I'm not confident in. Let's just say I want Zack Ertz and Dallas Goedert out there.
And as of now, their backups at the wide receiver position are my guy, Greg Ward, who I have to be 100% honest, had a disappointing preseason. You can talk to the joint practices. I saw the preseason games. He didn't make any splash plays. He made very few plays, period. Last year, he was their number one wide receiver, more catches than anyone else at the wide receiver position. That's got to count for something, but it wasn't like that put so many chips in the bank that he could come back and do nothing this preseason. He came back and did next to nothing this preseason. So I got to admit, my confidence is down on my guy, Greg Ward, but it is certainly well above that of J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. I still don't understand how this guy's on the team. Other than Howie Roseman used the second-round pick on him, he's done squat-ta since he got into the league, and he is an option with the Eagles because if they've only got 5 wide receivers, and we readily admit Reagor's a question mark, and Watkins a question mark, and Greg Ward has not stepped up this year, by process of elimination, Arcega-Whiteside's going to get a chance here. I don't have any confidence in him making plays. That, to me, makes the wide receiver position a very questionable position.
Yeah, and they could always remember they magically got Travis Fulgham through waivers. John Hightower's still here. They signed the other Keyshawn Johnson. So they have bodies to elevate if they need to elevate bodies, but none of them are in. I mean, JJ's on this team. I talk all the time about, first and second round picks. Look, he deserves to be on this team for the way he played in the summer, only because the other guys don't deserve to be on the team. I mean, if you saw Travis Fulgham and you saw John Hightower, you wouldn't be shaking your head. He had a better summer than those guys. Now, you could have probably picked up somebody better on the waiver wire than all three. That's the problem. That's the problem. You got to get better at that position. And for the assets the Eagles have poured into it, first-round pick in 2021, first-round pick in 2020, second-round pick in 2019, it's astonishing they can't get it right. It is astonishing. You look around this league, Jody. Everybody's got receivers. It's not a hard position to find at least competency. The Eagles haven't been able to do it.
Why do you think they didn't upgrade their receiver position through a waiver pickup?
Well, maybe it was just as simple as, I know Jacksonville picked up a receiver. Maybe it was as simple as not getting the guy they claimed. Maybe it was they didn't feel there was value there. Maybe, my biggest argument is I think they needed a veteran presence, and I still think that. I still think they need a more veteran presence at receiver. If for the bare minimum, just as sort of a foundation for that room. I mean, Greg Ward is the veteran in that room, and he was a quarterback at the University of Houston. I mean, look, I would like to have some kind of veteran presence in that room. I really would, but they are where they are.
They are, and the veteran presence is a tight end, which is both Dallas Goedert and Zack Ertz, who's still here, despite the fact that some media outlets had him traded 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times between.
I don't know one who didn't. And by the way, I'm writing about this. Well, you're not a media outlet. You're a media legend.
Of course I am a media outlet. I'm a media outlet unto myself. The same way you are a media outlet.
That's okay. You're fair. Fair point. I'll phrase it this way, and this is not an insult to you. Anyone who was around the team, I don't think there was anyone who didn't think on a daily basis, who didn't think that Zack Ertz would be out of here. By the way, Zack Ertz didn't think Zack Ertz would be here. Howie Roseman, it's interesting because when Zack talked last week, he said in the end, Howie Roseman believed in him more than anybody else because he wouldn't waver as far as what he thought the value was. Now, he was willing to trade Zack Ertz. He wanted a day 2 pick. He wanted a 3rd round pick minimum. Nobody around the league thought Zack Ertz at that stage coming off that season with that contract was worth a 3rd round pick. And Howie stood his ground and said, if you're not giving me this, I'm not trading the guy.
All right.
I think it's interesting.
Let me hop in here for just 1 second. And I'm hooking you up to the truth-o-meter here. Okay, Johnny Mac? I expect a truthful answer. Which of these 2 statements is more true? Howie Roseman held tight to asking for a day 2 pick in exchange for Zack Ertz because he thought Zack Ertz had a chance to bounce back and return to maybe just below Pro Bowl level status, or Howie Roseman wanted to make sure he got no egg on his face for having to settle for a 3rd round pick for a guy that they gave a good second contract to. Which one do you think was more?
Well,
Howie's tremendous football evaluation and ability to judge the bounce back of a player, or Howie's self-preservation?
Well, can I pick a C?
Yes, feel free.
Because I think the first part of A is correct. I don't think the second part of the first part of what you said is correct. I don't think he thought it was going to be this big bounce back season. But I don't think there would have been egg on his face. And by the way, I'm not saying Howie Roseman had great personnel acumen. I don't think he does. I'm saying Zack Ertz now believes that Howie Roseman actually valued him more than the rest of the league. I think Howie wanted a 3rd round pick because Howie's about leverage. We always use the Sam Bradford scenario. Howie's about leveraging people. Howie's about winning trades. Howie's got a little Sam Hinkie in him in the fact that he wants to win a trade at all costs, even when maybe it's not that big of a deal to not get a win in a trade. He's kind of obsessed with that. I think that is what went on. And he was going to win this stinking trade if there was going to be a trade. That's what I think happened.
Right. And to me, I called it self-preservation, and I think it is, because if you're always winning trades, you're going to be perceived to be doing a great job in your position. So that's we're agreeing. We're just using semantical different terms. And you're right. Here's the best point that you made, where I think you're making the most salient point, and the thing that's going to actually help the Eagles this year. It all comes down to what Zack Ertz believes. You and I can have an opinion here on Birds 365, which is nice. But if Zack Ertz is in a better mental spot because he thinks Howie Roseman held out for that higher pick because Howie values him. No, Howie values himself and looking good himself. And I don't think he did it out of the goodness of his heart or his advanced evaluation of Zack Ertz. But if Zack believes that, good on you, Zack. Go out and kick some you-know-what this year. Get yourself 80 catches. Get yourself 10 touchdowns. Get yourself a mega contract during the offseason. If it motivates him and keeps him happy and got him as a productive Eagle, all Eagle fans should be happy for it.
Yeah, it certainly seems to have. And sometimes, and you know this in sports, it's better to be lucky than good, Jody. Sometimes it just works out for you. But I do think there's this correlation. This is where I said at the beginning of this segment, look, just because Zack is here, just because we all said he wasn't going to be here, the two things aren't mutually exclusive. Zack didn't expect to be here. Zack said goodbye. The Eagles wanted to trade Zack Ertz. The Eagles expected to trade Zack Ertz. It didn't get done. It didn't get done because Howie's trying to leverage. And if Rick Spielman called up after Irv Smith got hurt, and the name would have been, hey, Zack Ertz, not Dallas Goedert, and he was offering the second-round pick, Zack Ertz would be in Minnesota right now.
Probably would, much to the chagrin of Nick Sirianni, because I think Sirianni.
Oh, I agree with that, too. Nick loves him.
Sirianni's got plans to throw the ball to Zack Ertz a lot this year. We'll see how it shakes out. All right, Mac and Mac, guys. John McMullen, Jody McDonald. We got another guest coming. Conor Orr, who's been on with us several times since the start of the show, does an outstanding job covering the entire National Football League for Sports Illustrated. He's scheduled to join us next here on Birds 365.
Hey, Eagles fans, if you're a subscriber to the JAKIB Media YouTube channel, you are already registered to win a pair of season tickets for the upcoming season. That's right, you could win a pair of season tickets for the upcoming 2021 season just for being a subscriber. If you're watching and you're not a subscriber, do it now. Subscribe to the JAKIB Media YouTube channel right now. What do you need to do? Subscribe right now.
As a hardworking American, you've never experienced how tough life can be until now. A catastrophic injury while working on the job. A personal injury from someone else's negligence. Turned away by other law firms in the region who didn't bother to learn your story. It's time to meet the Fritz & Bianculli Law Firm and managing partner Brian Fritz. Badly injured? Call the Fritz & Bianculli Law Firm. Find out why they say, we got this.
The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local Union 98, is a proud sponsor of The Labor Show with J-Doc and Krause every Saturday night from 6 till 8 p.m. IBEW Local 98's highly trained and superbly skilled electricians are the best in the business, setting the highest safety standards in the electrical industry. So when you're planning your next industrial, commercial, or residential project, choose an IBEW Local 98 union contractor. Learn more at IBEW98.org.
The savoring taste of a good bag of beef jerky is so enjoyable at any time of the day, as long as you can find it. Here's what we suggest. Pure Bull Beef Jerky is our answer, and soon it will be yours. Locally produced in the Philadelphia region, this high-quality, healthy protein snack is easy to secure. Go to steersnacks.com, and you'll see hot garlic, tropical heat, Pure Bull dry rub, and our favorite, Huck and Fod. What's that? Huck and Fod. Go now to steersnacks.com.
I get scared sometimes.
Of a lot of things.
Joining in.
Decisions.
The dark.
The dark.
But I once heard someone say,
But as I always say,
it's okay to be afraid.
as long as you face the fear.
And keep moving forward.
Wherever you are in life, count on the name trusted in insurance for over 80 years. Independence Blue Cross.
On the field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on three. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Appreciate you hopping aboard here on Birds 365. It's game week. They will actually play games. They count this week in the National Football League. Here to jump all around the league with us is a guy who does it day in and day out. Sports Illustrated. He's been on with us a couple of times before. Looking forward to talking to him again today. Conor Orr joins us here on Birds 365. Conor, are you ready for some football?
Yeah, it's been a while. So it'll be good to see fans in the stands, too.
It's good. We saw fans in the stands, Connor, over the weekend, college football. And I do want to start there with the sort of mini bye week baked into the new preseason schedule. So you had all these players going back to their colleges in this environment with this, 100,000 people here, 70, 80,000 people there. How are coaches in this league thinking about this with COVID testing? And look, we see it with Zach Martin potentially out for Thursday night. Is this going to be a bigger deal this year than last year?
Well, Tom Brady made that point. He thought that there might be a bigger concern with COVID, with the Delta variant, with all this stuff going on than it was last year. Maybe players feel a little bit more relaxed because they're vaccinated. They'll put themselves in different situations, and the world is still in that strange sort of half opened up phase. So I think it might actually affect teams more. Yeah, because players are more willing to probably go out and go out to dinner, leave the facility somewhere without a mask on. And that's their right. They got the vaccine and all that stuff, but that doesn't mean that you won't come back positive. Right. And the testing protocol is still as strict. So it's really interesting. I mean, this was supposed to be a nice weekend baked in. I know a lot of NFL staffers who got to go home and relax and, have a Labor Day, with their families, which is the whole point of this bye week. But that said, there are some, there's some baked in risks there too.
Connor, speaking of Tom Brady, and yes, we'll find out on Thursday night. He's finally getting old. It's not going to be well, no, probably he will be great again. He's never going to get old. He's friggin' Methuselah, that guy. Anyway, Brady took some stances last week against the league, which you got to be the GOAT to be able to say the kind of things that he said. That the way that they officiate games, they reward bad offensive plays by throwing flags for hard hits and overprotection of the quarterbacks. You have to have that kind of gravitas to make those kind of statements. Will his stance against the over-officiated the NFL actually get any traction? Will the league actually listen to him because he is Tom Brady?
I thought it was a nice little bit of strategy for him to get on the side of all the guys who are going to try to tackle him. That was a good.
Very true.
That was a good bit of politicking there by Tom Brady. But I think that anytime a player weighs in at that level and he has that kind of, like you said, gravitas, I think that does have an impact on things moving forward. That said, I mean, the NFL is way too far down this road at this point to back up on player safety issues. I mean, there's just going to be wave and wave and wave of, post-career, concussion lawsuits, all that stuff. I mean, none of that's going away, and I would say that even more so now that these players are retiring and have a platform and social media is what it is. And, these older players didn't have that platform. They're going to be open and honest about their symptoms, what they're going through from the moment that they step off the field, and they have a big audience. And so I think the NFL is scared of that. I think that they're going to continue to do what they can to lessen the impact of that. And while a lot of people may agree with Tom Brady there, I think, you're between a rock and a hard place from a business perspective.
All right, Connor, let's shift it to on the field. Obviously, we're Birds 365. So I want to start with the NFC East, and I want to get your thoughts on this particular division. And we'll start with the Eagles. So to me, what defines this season for Philadelphia is uncertainty. It starts with a rookie head coach and a young quarterback that has started 4 games in his career, taken 10 preseason snaps. Is there any way to sort of get a sliding scale with this team? As far as prediction wise, as far as certainty, can anybody know what to expect when we hit week 1 in Atlanta?
No, they were one of the hardest teams. I went and I predicted every team's NFL record by way of picking every single game, and I had the Eagles at 5 wins, but you look at it over and over again, and you could say, okay, well, what if Jalen Hurts is one of these guys that is, uses his mobility in the right way, just keeps, is efficient, picks up first downs. The tight ends are really good, and so all of a sudden the offensive line, if they stay healthy all year, all these variables, and you could see them winning, 7, 8, 9, maybe even 10 games. I don't know. I mean, I think that they have the biggest sort of window in the NFC East where, you could see them very easily finishing in last place, and it almost felt like that was by design for a little while. But now it's like you look at it again, and you look at how all the rest of the teams have deficiencies, and you're like, I don't think they're that much worse than anybody else.
Connor, I do want to get this on the record too, because I guess I'm pleasantly surprised. The NFL every year before they ever start playing preseason games come out with their points of emphasis memo. Things we need to look at as far as refereeing goes and how they may call the game differently. We just talked about Brady questioning the way the game was called. Well, the NFL questions itself, and it's a good thing because I think they're always trying to improve and tighten up their game. We had the points of emphasis this year, and I'm always intrigued to see if you can pick up on it in preseason action. I watch enough of the games on re-air on the NFL Network. Really wasn't a factor for me. The block below the legs on the outside a little. The taunting thing didn't turn out to be that big a deal. Is it going to be standard operating procedure refereeing the games this year for you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I remember going all the way back to, the 2010, 2011 when the changes in the helmet-to-helmet rules happened, and that year especially with the body weight rule on the quarterbacks where it was heavy during the preseason, it was obnoxious through the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season, and then it basically just disappeared, right? And the NFL will say, well, that's players, that's teams coaching it better. But in reality, they're just trying to get this thing on the board. They're trying to say that we did our part to protect the players, and they're going to annoy everybody about it for 2 or 3 weeks, and then it's going to go away. And, the one thing I don't necessarily understand is the taunting. I don't see how that factors into it, but like anything else, I mean, this is going to be up to the discretion of a crew, and there's going to be guys that have a high tolerance for that stuff, and then there are going to be guys that don't. And that's the one variable that I could see where, maybe it costs the team a game this year, I think that was one of the things where they wanted to make that a point of emphasis for some reason. Again, I'm not sure why, but that's the one carryover I think that could maybe get a little ridiculous this year.
Well, a little follow-up to that, Connor. You think the league learned anything from last season and the fact that, one of the things that J.C. Treader and the NFLPA used about scaling back off-season work was how good the product was on the field, despite essentially having no off-season, very limited training camp. Now, I would argue the reason the product looked better on the field, or at least looked as good, they stopped calling holding. They let the guys play. Might have been, you can argue both sides. It was certainly more aesthetic, I would argue. It was certainly more entertaining. And at the end of the day, isn't that what the league is here for? Do you think they learned from something like that? Is that going to continue?
Yeah, I could see something like that continuing. But, it's interesting. I mean, all it takes is a couple of high-profile players to come out on the other end of that. And, you wonder if somebody comes out and, social media as it is right now, I mean, a player could come out and make a great point and the media could jump on board and all of a sudden the league's on the defensive again about it. But the argument in terms of the product being good, I thought the product was good last year. I also thought that we were so starving for entertainment at that point that, like, we were in the grips of a pandemic. It was a pretty, bleak time, and to have football, I think, was such a lift for everybody. So I think we were willing to overlook a lot of things collectively too. But I think it'll be interesting to see how they do a little bit now that they're under the microscope a lot more.
You mentioned high-profile players. I want to ask you about a high-profile announcer. That'd be the lead analyst for CBS, Tony Romo. Took a couple of stances this week. I want to get your thoughts on both of them. First one is, and here's the quote, Johnny Mac. I found the quote. Tony Romo on Jets rookie quarterback Zach Wilson. I think he's going to be in the discussion as one of the top 3 to 5 quarterbacks in the NFL very quickly. I think he's unbelievable. And compared him to Patrick Mahomes. He hasn't thrown a pass in the NFL yet, and Romo's already comparing him to Patrick Mahomes. Tell me he's right, Conor Orr.
Well, I think a lot of these players, it's funny how quickly they criticize the media during their playing days, and then how quickly they figure out the formula for getting attention. And once they're done, and I think that might have been CBS saying, "Well, why don't you say something a little bit crazy to hype everybody up for the broadcast?" But I like Zach Wilson. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he will eventually be a good quarterback because the scheme is very good. I mean, they're running that Shanahan outside zone system, and they got the 2 guys that you need to run it. They got LaFleur and the passing game coordinator, and they had John Benton, the offensive line coach. And those are the 2 guys that you need to run that scheme. And regardless, I think it's going to look good. I think he's going to have about as much time as he had at BYU, and that was a big deal. Everyone made it during the draft that, he had too much time at BYU. But if you're constantly running these play actions, you're not going to get touched as much as you would. I think all that works. I think he's still got a long way to go, though. I disagreed with a lot of people who said that, he was probably the most pro-ready. I mean, a couple of the practices that I was at this year, he didn't look as accurate as I expected, but he cleaned a lot of that up in the preseason games. So, I mean, am I ready to put him right up there with Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and all those guys? Not quite, but I'm optimistic about him in the long term as long as they can retain that coaching staff.
And the other thing that Romo put an opinion out on was he thinks the Eagles are underrated and thinks they can win double-digit games. That surprised me a little bit. John and I are on record at like 7 or 8 wins. Neither one of us has gotten to 10 just yet. No, it's a wide open division, not a great division. How would you make the argument for the Eagles winning 10 games?
Offensive line stays healthy, and they win the games that they're supposed to win. I was at the joint practices between the Eagles and the Jets. And, the Jets have a developing offensive line, and I saw the Eagles defensive line beat up on them, destroy that offensive line. They are good enough to do that, right? And, you're going to get the Giants twice a year. The Cowboys offensive line is not what it was. If you can win up front and your offensive line stays healthy enough to have some semblance of a running game and keep Jalen Hurts in rhythm, then I think you have a shot. And, we don't know what Nick Sirianni's offense is going to look like, but if it's anything like a Frank Reich offense, it's going to be super quarterback friendly. You're not going to panic a lot. You're going to always have options and you're going to know where you're going with the ball before the snap. And so a lot of that stuff's going to be, helpful for him as a young quarterback. So who knows? But again, I think, lowest basement in that division, but probably a medium to high ceiling as well.
Conor, we talked about Zach Wilson. I want to talk about 2 of the other young quarterbacks, and Chicago seems to want to wait on Justin Fields. San Francisco wants to wait on Trey Lance. Is that the way to go in the modern NFL, or is it throw them in the deep end of the pool, especially when you don't have great options in front of them? What's your take on that?
I think it's all personnel dependent. It's like schedule dependent. It's a lot of things. And, if I am the Bears with that offensive line opening the season against the Rams, there's a 0% chance I'm putting Justin Fields on. That's going to ruin him. And, Aaron Donald will be in his face all game. He'll develop myriad bad habits over the course of 60 minutes that you're going to spend all season trying to erase. But it depends on team by team. I think the 49ers are going to work Trey Lance in situationally. it wouldn't be surprised for me to see them almost do what they did with Harbaugh and Kaepernick, where it was, maybe a package here and there, and then that develops into something over time. By the time the trade deadline comes around, he's ready to take, the baton and do this full time. So I think every team's going to approach it differently. I think it's, you can't lock yourself into one situation or another where it says, I'm going to sit this guy all year when really he could make your team better on the field. But some of these teams, if you're up there and bad enough to pick a quarterback, you don't have all the necessary things to be able to support a rookie quarterback. So you shouldn't play him.
Kind of want to get your take on rookie head coaches in the National Football League. We just went through it a couple of years ago when the Eagles moved on from Chip Kelly. They hired Doug Peterson, who some people thought was just a continuation of the Andy Reid era here and didn't like the signing at all. And Doug came in and had a below 500 year his first year, and then second year, boom, he wins the Super Bowl. Kind of out of nowhere. Nobody expected it, but God, did they love it. We now have Nick Sirianni in place. Judging first-year head coaches, you've been watching all these teams for all these years. There's a handful of changes every year in the National Football League. What are some of the markers that you look for that maybe this has got a chance to work, or, oh, my God, this was a bad hire? Is there anything you're tracking in year one of a new head coach, new town, new system, new team that specifically grabs your attention?
I think a lot of it is, what are you doing with the existing players to kind of bake in the things that they're already good at? And, how much are you coming in cookie cutter style and saying, this is my system and everybody that doesn't fit into it has to go? And I think that's a really interesting thing, because it's a fast way to destroy a locker room if you go the other way. It's a really good way to kind of just get off the ground running the other way. So, for example, Brandon Staley in Los Angeles, what is he doing with that old offense versus the new offense? How much that stuff is he continuing to bring over? How many of those playmakers and all that stuff are you making life easier for Justin Herbert? We saw with Hugh Jackson, for example, when he left in Cleveland, he had never once talked to Lincoln Riley about his offense, but, when he had Baker Mayfield, and how many of these coaches are doing their research, finding out what's making their best players comfortable and continuing to do that in their new jobs. And I think you can find that stuff out pretty quickly, because guys really look like, a square peg in a round hole if they're out there and they're not prepared well.
That's interesting, Connor. How much do you think the league has changed from that standpoint, especially with the quarterback position? When you mentioned Lincoln Riley, Baker Mayfield, how much do these young coaches look at what they did well in college and build their offenses around that versus the old school way of thinking, where you would bring a guy in and teach him a pro style offense?
Look at Carson Wentz. I mean, that year that the Eagles, he tore his ACL at the end of the season, that was during the RPO explosion. And a lot of that came from Philly. That came from them watching North Dakota State tape and looking at what he was comfortable throwing and baking a lot of that into the offense. And then every team started running it because it was, it was really good. And then they figured out that no defense was prepared to stop it. And, you're kind of at the cutting edge of that and you win a Super Bowl. And so I think once stuff like that happens, other teams look around and say, okay, there's probably a reason that this quarterback popped to me in the first place and that he got to the stage where he might look draftable. And so, where can we kind of reverse engineer this and sort of steal some of this? But the availability of film at this point, Pro Football, all the coaches have the Pro Football Focus searchable film database at this point. The availability of that stuff makes stealing offenses, stealing plays, stealing concepts so much easier than it was, 5 years ago even. And so if you're not doing that, I think you're doing your quarterback a gigantic disservice.
Connor, since you brought him up, I want to follow up. Carson Wentz, the former quarterback here in Philadelphia, major issue, talked his way out of town. Eagles with a ton of dead cap money this year, but they've turned the page and moved on. Carson's already got a couple of hurdles he's got to get over there in Indianapolis. The foot injury and the COVID issue, although he's another one that has not officially said he hasn't been vaccinated. You can pretty much read into it with the amount of time that he's missed with close tracing. It looks like he has not gotten vaccinated. And some of the media out in Indianapolis have taken him to task as a leader of the football team, the quarterback to not get vaccinated doesn't make him look like a good teammate. Is it going to work with Frank Reich out there? Some people believe this is the return of Carson Wentz. Others believe good riddance to bad rubbish, Carson Wentz. Good luck, Indianapolis. You can have him. We don't want him. How is the Carson Wentz story going to play year one in Indy?
Well, I think he thought maybe I'll get out of Philly and the reporters won't be as tough out there in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
And then he found out the hard way that they were gonna get after him too. But it's gonna be interesting. I mean, I think it's interesting that what's the one thing, that poise, that that leadership ability that was questioned regularly in Philadelphia, throughout his tenure there, and what's the one thing that's followed him to Indianapolis? I think that the on-field stuff, as long as he has the right offense, that's always going to take care of itself. Frank Reich is going to reinstall what they ran in Philadelphia, where again, quarterback's going to know where the ball's going when it comes out. It makes them more comfortable. They play a lot faster, but everything else needs to be filled in here. Stepping up in front of a team, controlling like a franchise quarterback can control. And that's going to be interesting because we've been waiting for Carson Wentz to do that for 5 years now.
Conor, have you talked to any coaches about? There's three I know of. Certainly Indianapolis, Minnesota, Baltimore. Their starting quarterbacks are not vaccinated. Have you talked to any of those coaches and said, "Oh, look, how do you prepare for this? How is it?" I mean, we talk about uncertainty when it comes to teams on the field, when we talk about personnel, talent, coaching scheme, evaluate, whatever. But the fact that you don't know if you're going to have your starting quarterback on a whim, how has that affected teams in certain cities?
I'm sure it's going to be fascinating, right? I mean, Kirk Cousins said, well, we'll just have our meetings outside. And, that's nice, Minnesota in the winter, when it's negative 35 degrees outside, you think the rest of those guys are going to want to be out there. And so I don't know. I think it puts them in a really difficult spot. I thought Mike Zimmer handled it the best in that he was very aggressive. He said, yeah, go ahead, reporters, show up and see which guys have to get the daily COVID tests. I don't care, and that way he's sort of positing this as, imagine if Kirk Cousins does test positive and he misses a game, he has the rest of the locker room on his side where he's saying, I told him to do it and he's not doing it. And, this is all we can do about it. I don't think it's as they're panicking as much, and I'll use the Patriots as an example. Everyone thought that Bill Belichick cut Cam Newton because of the vaccine thing. That couldn't be further from the truth, and so I think it all depends on your feelings on it, but I think some coaches are more concerned about it, less concerned about it. But I think that there's definitely some frustration there. I mean, the fact that one of these guys could miss a game because of that choice when it's, there's an FDA approved version of the vaccine out at this point, I think is probably pretty frustrating to them.
All right. I need your analytical take on this one, Conor, because John and I couldn't get together and get on the same page last week. We talked about trying to determine if Jalen Hurts is going to be the quarterback of the Eagles in 2022. I think you need a statistic to at least look at. It doesn't have to be the be-all, end-all, but you have to have a baseline to start with. And I think quarterback rating is the best of non-perfect analytic you can use to try and judge the quarterback. We're both old school. We both believe in the eye test. But I think you have to have some numbers to support it and then add that to the eye test. John believes more in the eye test, and he doesn't like quarterback rating as much as I do.
Passer rating.
Passer rating. I'd say quarterback, right. Passer rating. Thank you, John. Pro Football Focus as an analytical basis. Again, some things they do I like a lot, and other things they put out just has me scratching my head. And how do they come up with that? Do you use it? How much do you use it? Do you think it's a good analytical resource for NFL fans?
I think that there are some places that have good analytical resources. There are certain, for example, Football Outsiders has defense adjusted value over average, right? And ESPN has total quarterback rating. And some of those they take into account situational football, down distance, whether you're leading, whether you're behind. And I think that that's a lot clearer of a picture. Again, the eye test is the most important. And I still think almost all coaches evaluate off of their eyes, and they don't look at this stuff. But it is a nice sort of, soapbox to kind of get your base on if you're looking at quarterbacks, because especially now that they can pull out situational stuff, I think it's really valuable. Like, for example, if quarterback, I remember a couple of years ago, Eli Manning had high interception numbers. A lot of that stuff came right before the half when you're throwing Hail Marys, or when you're, down, 15 plus points and you're just chucking the ball up and trying to tie the score. So does that make you an interception prone quarterback, or does it make you a quarterback who doesn't care about your stats and you're just trying to get the team back into the game, And so I think that having that kind of stuff is helpful, especially when evaluating that position. But I've talked to a lot of players, and, I think a lot of them are still very resistant to this stuff. And, really kind of, it's, what is Aqib Talib told Tom Curran out in New England, that it's like reading the sheet music without listening to the tune. You know what I mean? And I think that's kind of still what it is a little bit.
All right, Conor, I want to veer you back before we lose you, NFC East, because I want to get your thoughts on the division as a whole. I think a lot of people think it's sort of the haves and have-nots. If you want to call Dallas and Washington the haves, the have-nots would be the Eagles and Giants. How do you see the division playing out? Is Washington the one team that maybe, because of that defense, can really step up and become a difference maker in the NFC? Or is it the Cowboys because of their offense?
Well, I had the Giants winning the division, but
wow.
And I had to have my picks in after the week 1 of the preseason, and that offensive line really scared me in the New England game, to the point where, not that I'm backing off of it. I mean, I think Joe Judge is a good coach, and I stand by what I said about Daniel Jones. I think he looked excellent in all the practices I attended this preseason, but I don't really know how they're going to sustain a whole season with that offensive line. And so I think Washington's interesting because they can kind of be a poor man's Buccaneers. You can move the ball, and you're going to win at the line of scrimmage. And in a division that's just still not established, that might be enough. And Chase Young is going to be a star in this league. And, I could see him, contending for that defensive player of the year, just because they have all the pieces in there, especially interior defensive line, to get him at the quarterback on every down.
Do you think, last one for me, Eagles specific, do you think DeVonta Smith gets 1,000 yards this year? The Eagles' all-time rookie record for most yards is Deshaun Jackson in the low 900s. So take it either way. Will he set the new all-time record? Will that extend over 1,000 yards with an extra game to play? Is this something Eagle fans are going to be able to sink their teeth into and get excited about their young superstar wide receiver going forward?
I think 1,000 is probably a tough ask. And, but I was pretty optimistic. It's hard not to leave Jets joint practices optimistic when, he's working on Bless Austin, and really destroying him on every down. But then, and Austin got cut a few weeks later. But I like everything that I've seen. I think the one real indicator for me was at that camp, he was helping other people line up, and this was only his second or third week of practice in the NFL. And he's, telling people where to go. And so he's got a grasp of the offense. He can get off cornerbacks. Like, I haven't seen anybody really that agile and aggressive. They say the thinness is a disadvantage, and I tend to disagree when you have that kind of body control. And so I think he'll get open. It's a matter of getting the opportunities at this point.
Conor, we appreciate you hopping on board with us. Thanks much, my friend. We will touch base from time to time during the year. Gave us good insight today. We'll get it from you again down the road, and we'll be reading you on sportsillustrated.com. Thanks for hopping on with us.
All right. Thanks, guys.
That is Conor Orr from SI.com here with us on Birds 365. All right, Jody Mac, we still got one more segment to go for today before we put a bow on the show. It's getting close. Eagles-Falcons just around the corner, Eagles fans.
Hey, Eagles fans, if you're a subscriber to the JAKIB Media YouTube channel, you are already registered to win a pair of season tickets for the upcoming season. That's right, you could win a pair of season tickets for the upcoming 2021 season just for being a subscriber. If you're watching and you're not a subscriber, do it now. Subscribe to the JAKIB Media YouTube channel right now. What do you need to do? Subscribe right now.
As a hardworking American, you've never experienced how tough life can be until now. A catastrophic injury while working on the job. A personal injury from someone else's negligence. Turned away by other law firms in the region who didn't bother to learn your story. It's time to meet the Fritz & Beyond Cooley Law Firm and managing partner Brian Fritz. Badly injured? Call the Fritz & Beyond Cooley Law Firm. Find out why they say, "We got this."
The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local Union 98, is a proud sponsor of The Labor Show with J. and Krause every Saturday night from 6 till 8 p.m. IBEW Local 98's highly trained and superbly skilled electricians are the best in the business, setting the highest safety standards in the electrical industry. So when you're planning your next industrial, commercial, or residential project, choose an IBEW Local 98 union contractor. Learn more at IBEW98.org.
The savoring taste of a good bag of beef jerky is so enjoyable at any time of the day, as long as you can find it. Here's what we suggest. Pure Bull Beef Jerky is our answer, and soon it will be yours. Locally produced in the Philadelphia region, this high-quality, healthy protein snack is easy to secure. Go to steersnacks.com, and you'll see hot garlic, tropical heat, Pure Bull dry rub, and our favorite, Huck and Fod. What's that? Huck and Fod. Go now to steersnacks.com.
I get scared sometimes.
Of a lot of things.
Joining in.
Decisions.
The dark.
The dark.
But I once heard someone say,
But as I always say,
it's okay to be afraid.
as long as you face the fear.
And keep moving forward.
Wherever you are in life, count on the name trusted in insurance for over 80 years. Independence Blue Cross.
On the field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on three. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Coming down the home stretch of a Birds 365 Tuesday game week episode here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. Thanks for tuning in with the Mac and Mac guys. Did want to get Conor's taken. We thank both Conor and Vinny Cerrato. I asked Conor about DeVonta Smith breaking Deshaun Jackson's rookie receiving record with the Birds, which I think he will do. Vinny, when he was on with us, told a T.O. story from his San Francisco days, turning back the clock on T.O. dropping balls all over preseason practices, and then the first preseason game go out and catching 5 balls, including a touchdown. You never know with some of these young players, young wide receivers. DeVonta Smith in his game that he did play dropped a couple of balls, hit him right in the hands. The plays he's got to make. I have faith he's going to turn around and make those plays when the season starts. If you were worried about DeVonta because of those couple drops, at least what I'm reading out at Cincinnati, apparently Jamar Chase is dropping everything, not just a couple, but he drops a couple every game. And every time they throw the ball to him, he seems to drop the ball. And he, of course, was picked before Mr. Smith and was a guy who the Eagles actually were targeting and were hoping was going to be there when they realized they had no shot at him. That's when they traded back down. So rookie wide receivers in the NFL, Johnny Mac, you can't count on them. They need time to adjust and get ready for the NFL. The question is, how long is that time?
Yeah, and that's my concern with DeVonta Smith is the expectations. I think he's going to be a really good player. And we go back to Justin Jefferson last year, 1,400 yards, I think, on the nose. It's not going to happen. It's so rare. And part of it, again, is where you land, as Conor Orr was talking about with quarterbacks and young quarterbacks, and the fact that, he happened to land with a high volume quarterback, and I'm talking about Jefferson with another good receiver. So that takes some of the pressure off you. DeVonta Smith, he's got to be the wide receiver one. He doesn't have another guy who's scoring 14 touchdowns. He doesn't have a quarterback that throws for 4,000 yards every year. So for people that think it's going to be great from moment one, I don't think it's going to be great. What Conor also pointed out too, when he was at Jets Eagles practice as I was, DeVonta Smith just kills people off the line of scrimmage. So number one, that's tremendous. You don't see that often from rookie receivers. He's got sort of an old soul nature of having a veteran presence about him, despite being a rookie. He understands the offense. He's lining up people. I talked about veteran receiver. You should have a veteran receiver that's lining up DeVonta Smith. DeVonta Smith has got to line up Jalen Reagor and Quez Watkins. And that's more pressure on him on top of it. So I think he's going to be a really good player, but I think there's going to be some growing pains.
The relationship between Jalen Hurts and DeVonta Smith is going to be a big part of the Eagles' success this year. I think it's good already. I think it can only grow, and I think that could be a major player for the Eagles this season. And remember that Jalen Hurts yesterday was named captain. I'm going full circle here on you, JM, because I brought this up at the beginning, and I think we got off on a Singleton tangent because he's one of the captains, more so the special teams captain, but one of the defense. 4 defensive players, if you consider Singleton defense, 2 offensive players. There was one noted name missing as far as I was concerned, and that was Lane Johnson. I get it that Kelsey's been a big part of it, and Kelsey's been on the field more often, whereas Lane has had his fair share of injuries. Brooks, of course, was a guy who came in from somewhere else. I don't know that you would hold that against him, but he's not a tried and true, drafted and been with the team forever type Eagle the way Kelsey has and Lane Johnson has. He didn't get the vote as one of the 6 Eagle captains. You got a theory to that or a reason why that was the case? Because that did surprise me a little bit.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me either way. Maybe they just picked one offensive lineman. And obviously Kelsey's,
right. But they took 2 defensive linemen.
Yeah, that's true. No, I don't. I maybe makes fun of people too much. Lane is vicious. He said we're vicious to each other. Maybe that wore some people the wrong way. I don't know. Is
he good at his cutting comments?
Oh my Lane, yeah. You got to be ready. You got to be ready for him. But then again, you got to be ready for PG as well. So you never know with these things. And by the way, I guess in hockey, it's a big deal. Football captains, I don't think it's that big of a deal. But that's me.
Hockey far and away more important than any of the other sports. The captaincy really does have an importance. Baseball, basketball, football, not nearly as much. But that's a funny story about Lane Johnson. And don't forget, Lane Johnson, part of the post-game show, which you're going to be part of the post-game show here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. Correct, McMullen?
That's true. I think Lane is a little higher up on the marquee. Everybody is, but we'll take it. I'm just a part of the show. But I'll be in Atlanta. So there you go.
The peeps love you. The peeps love you. They love you and they love to hate you. So you will be a big part of the post-game show. I guarantee you that whether Lane Johnson gets top billing or not, or however it shakes itself out, should be good to hear Lane here because he is. We had him on earlier this year when we had a Birds 365 show, and he was great with us. And yeah, he's a leader guy. The thing I think about Lane Johnson these days is, yes, he's out there doing commercials for Phil Abundance. So I thought maybe they'd throw him a bone and make him the captain, but they didn't. All right, you got practice today, buddy?
No practice today. Practice tomorrow. No, it's one of those things. This baked in what we talked about with Conor Orr. It's, that was part of the CBA when they scaled back the preseason, was given this extra bye week before week 1. So sort of like a regular week, man. Wednesday practice, Thursday practice, Friday practice, and boom, week 1, Atlanta Falcons.
Okay, so no practice today. They'll get back at it tomorrow. John and I will be back at it again Same bat time, same bat channel tomorrow.
Jeff Kerr in tomorrow. I'll be at the beginning.
Yeah, you got COVID testing.
Yeah, I think it's Monday.
You're out.
I'm all. Yeah, I got COVID testing tomorrow. Jeff Kerr will be in. I'll be in at 8:00 though, at the beginning of the show. Then it's up to weekly. It got ramped up to weekly. So Wednesdays are going to be an issue. But Jeff Kerr, my buddy's gonna, and your friend is gonna fill in as usual.
Carl will hold down the fort, but it tells you how good McMullen is. Co-host, guest, contributor, coming out of left field. He does it all for us here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. He'll be up, as he said, right off the bat, 8:00 tomorrow. We got a early morning contribution from Johnny Mac, but Jeff Kerr will be my sidekick tomorrow. We need you right back here 22 hours from now on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.